I have a bit of a confession to make.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So we kind of discussed this episode being our top 10 of 2019.
Yes.
After the first, I'd say 2 or 3 movies, it's all jumbled up in a group, and I really have a difficulty separating like number 4 from number 7.
Right. So you've got like a mushy middle.
Yeah, and I end up having like 3 or 4 films that are still kind of like contending for the final 2-3 spots.
Uh-huh.
So depending on how much I get to see, and I expect to see all of them before the actual awards season, although the Golden Globes are tonight, but we don't care about them.
No, we've been over that.
So I think this list is subject to change, but only in the middle. I think at the top, it's unlikely to change at all.
Okay.
But yeah, so did you have trouble with this year's top 10?
Not so much trouble as like what I did was I actually pushed myself and I created a list on Letterboxd, a public list of everything I saw in theaters this year.
Right.
Pretty much like ranked everything, all 55 of them. So
wow,
I put in the caveat in the list description saying it's a loosely ranked order. So
right.
like
Okay.
Invariably, like probably kind of like you, somewhere in the middle of the list, there's a lot of like, you know, areas where one movie could, you know, hop in front of another depending on how I feel. But on a given day or a given month, in this episode, we're going to be talking about like our top 10 of the year. But well, let's also mention a few of the ones that we really hated because there were still
okay.
There were a few that I really hated
okay.
too.
All right. That's usually that's something reserved for me, but okay.
So stay tuned for that.
Welcome to the Extra Buttery Podcast. It's the first episode of 2020. Welcome back to the show. Hope you had a good new year. Hope you had a good holiday. Today, as tradition on Kinetoscope, the first podcast for the year will be a year-end wrap-up. So Robert Snow, say hi, Rob.
Hey, coming to you from Toronto over here.
And Jason Chen in Vancouver. That's me. We're going to count down our top 10 films of 2019. We expect disagreements, agreements, some debate, some maybe a little anger towards each other, but it's okay. We're good friends.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's get to the list. Robert, start off with your... Do you want to go top to bottom or bottom to top?
Let me see. I think I will go bottom to top.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Number 10.
All right. So coming in at number 10 for me is The Farewell.
Oh, okay.
This one was kind of, for me, it was kind of hopping around because we had a plan originally to do a top 15 to make it easier on ourselves, but we, you know, forced ourselves to do number 10. So The Farewell for me, this is the movie by Lulu Wang, starring Awkwafina as a young woman, second generation American whose family is Chinese, who finds out that her grandmother has been diagnosed with terminal illness. And in her family's tradition, and the tradition of a lot of Chinese people, the idea is that they're going to keep this illness from the grandmother and let her pass away so that she doesn't experience any more like stress or fear or anything. But it's something that Awkwafina's character objects to, you know, based on the way that she's been raised in a more like Western or American context. She can't understand why somebody would do this to this woman that she cares so much about. And just the way that Lulu Wang she was telling a story that's probably familiar to a lot of people from that same context, from that same background, but does so in a way that's accessible to any type of audience member. You know, I'm sure regardless of what culture you come from, there's probably kind of similar things, similar weirdnesses that can pop up depending on where you've come from and how you treat your elders. And it really struck a chord with me when it came out, and I felt like I had to put it on my top 10 somewhere.
Yeah, so this one's on my top 10 as well. I'll review my list later, but the funny thing is, like, this film kind of got forgotten over the year because it was released so early on. And I'm kind of surprised there hasn't been like a late season awards push from it.
Yeah.
But it hasn't really like been forgotten from our memory, despite it being such an indie film. So this is one that I think is quite intriguing leading up to awards. It's one of those like sneaky dark horse ones that could get a nomination here or there, but I don't know. I don't feel a strong push for consideration.
It'll be cool to see, like, this might be more of a jumping off point for Lulu Wang in future movies. Like, this is kind of the one that grabs people's attention initially, but then it's whatever she does next that might get a bit more recognition from the industry. It's hard to tell.
Yes, I think so.
But
yes.
before we go too far down that tangent, number 9 for me is Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Probably going to be a controversial choice. The fact that it's on my...
That is a controversial choice.
The fact that it's on my top 10 at all. Certainly, there's been a lot of fighting over the past couple of weeks since it came out. But
Rob, I feel like we've kind of flipped roles. Like, I used to be the instigator. Now you're the instigator with your crazy, wild assertions.
It's, what's the expression? New year, new me or something?
Yeah, for like a week. and then everyone disappears from the gym. State your case. State your case.
Like, and actually, I was talking about this last night with 2 former guests on the show, Kate and Peter, who were with us for our TIFF episode, and we were having a very lively debate over a messenger thread about Star Wars. Well, not a debate, more just like hashing things out and talking about the movie again. And, I think a lot of people are in agreement, especially if you liked The Last Jedi, you dislike this. We kind of got into that in our last episode at the end of the year. But for me, I just love Star Wars. I'm willing to put up with all of its ridiculousness and its broken promises. I don't know what it is. It's maybe the first franchise that I ever loved, but I'm very open-minded when it comes to Star Wars, and I had to acknowledge that in my top 10. So it's there at number 9.
The Rise of Skywalker is a film that I wouldn't say a conspicuous miss, but it's definitely, I think, not really in the contention for a lot of top 10 lists. So, like, was there one specific factor, knowing how troubled the reception has been, that really made you put this film in the top 10?
I don't know. I guess I have to kind of give it to growing up with the series and rewatching the movies over and over again. And just like, I really like the mythology. I like the lore. I have read way too much of the supplemental content and the visual dictionaries and all that stuff. Not to say that a
true Star Wars fan.
Well, yeah, but we have to tread carefully, though, because there's been a few people out there in the Twitter sphere and elsewhere who have tried to make it sound as though the only way that you can enjoy The Rise of Skywalker is if you have this pre-existing knowledge, which I don't think is true. That's a very gatekeepery way of looking at the fandom, and I think that's not legitimate at all. But I do feel that I have that extra background, so not that it helps me enjoy it more, but I guess I have more context for maybe how much worse it could have been. There's certainly decisions that they made in some of the comics and the novels and things that are just so wacky and so out there. And the fact that they didn't do that is almost like a whew kind of thing. So
right. Okay. Number 8.
Yeah. Keeping on track here. Number 8 for me is Jordan Peele's Us. I've been trying recently to, I mentioned this on a previous episode, to try to, tiptoe a little bit more into the horror genre, because it was one that I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to. And honestly, there have been a few directors recently, Ari Aster being another one, who have been kind of pulling horror more out of the Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or other slasher movie type stuff, and more into a kind of like Hitchcockian style of horror, which we hadn't seen for a while. There weren't as many auteurs who were kind of doing who were doing like unique horror stories. And Jordan Peele is definitely one of them, like Get Out from a couple of years ago. Now this new one, Us, with some fantastic performances, certainly from Lupita Nyong'o and the rest of the cast. And just the fact that it's a totally original story with, it feels very simultaneously like mysterious, but also very fleshed out, definitely plugging into a lot of social commentary without being too heavy-handed with it. So yeah, for me, I really enjoyed that one. I had to have it on my top 10. You didn't get a chance to see Us, I know, so we won't dwell on it too much. But in number 7 for me has got to be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
I had a great time at it, but I can't say that it was like a top 5 for me. I appreciate the craft, but there were aspects of it that I was like, oh yeah, that's just Tarantino being Tarantino, him being very meta, and
yep.
And I could kind of see the seams of it a little bit. And as much of a like craftsman and as knowledgeable as he is about the period, and as subversive as the ending is, I couldn't put it way up there on my list, but I definitely enjoyed myself at it, so it's got to go in there somewhere.
I think it says something about Tarantino when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood cracked the top 10 of 2019, but it's not even considered close to some of his best movies.
It just, whether it's the fact that he's kind of recombining aspects of his other movies into this one kind of mega movie, or the fact that we saw like probably a handful of movies that were all set in like 1969 Hollywood this year. So maybe it was the, anniversary of the Manson murders or something was on the top of people's minds. But
they just like doing films about themselves anyway. So.
Yeah. There's definitely a bit of a problem runs through Hollywood anyway. But yeah.
Number six
for me was Jojo Rabbit from Taika Waititi.
This was a very controversial one because this was very divided actually from some of the stuff I read.
There was a few people who really strongly object to any kind of comedic depiction of Hitler. That was definitely one of the threads that was running there against it. There were other people who felt that maybe the laughs didn't really connect the way they should have, or that the message of the movie was a bit confused. But
right.
I don't know. For me, Taika Waititi's sense of humor is very much similar to my own. I mean, I've liked pretty much everything he's made that I've seen. Whether it's
you don't get tired of him?
No, I don't. I feel like he has this irreverence and this almost like surrealistic sense of humor that really gets to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he, the fact that he does it in like a historical satire in this one also really worked for me.
Okay. This one got like 1 star out of 4 or 5 from I think it was the Guardian critic Robbie Collin.
Oh yeah.
Which I generally don't agree with him all that often, but this was one of the ones where I was like really shocked to see how much he hated it, to be honest.
Yeah. Was it the comedic depiction of Hitler for him, or was it something else?
No. I think that's a really dumb argument to not like a movie because you didn't like how something's depicted. I think he didn't like how the film portrayed some of the characters. I think they were flat, and something about how like which character's lens Hitler is viewed from.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of people thought this Taika Waititi Hitler is a projection of this kid. Robbie Collin seems to think that is a projection of something else different entirely.
Oh, okay, I'd have to read his review to get a sense of what he means by that. Because I mean, for me, I definitely felt like it was a projection of the kid, the central kid Jojo.
Well, like the host of the radio show, BBC Radio 1, I think got into like a pretty big argument with him. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it's not, his take is obviously controversial as well, but it was a very divisive film. So you got 2 of them. So Jojo Rabbit and Rise of Skywalker, I should say. Interesting. All right.
For my top 5, there's a lot of very obvious ones in there, some of which you might end up sharing. Yeah. For number 5, I've got Knives Out, which we've already talked about here on the show. But again, like Rian Johnson, he's one of my guys. I've liked him more and more as time goes on, and just the combination of like a murder mystery, something that I already enjoy from like being a fan of the Poirot adaptations over the years, and just the cast and the way that he goes about it, the kind of the fact that it's an original story too. It's got a lot going for it.
Right.
But keeping on like a steady track, so we can get to yours. For me, number 4, Marriage Story from Noah Baumbach. Mm-hmm. We haven't really talked about it a huge amount here, but this for me was like, I remember describing it to various people as like the funniest movie about divorce that I've seen in a long time.
Well, maybe it depends on how you view divorce. Some people think it's hilarious, like anyway, right? So.
Right. But for something that is like a movie that's very talky and very based on actors doing their thing, I was with it the whole time. It's a longer movie. It's on the longer end. And if you don't like Noah Baumbach, I can definitely see you totally disagreeing with my placing it at number 4. But for me,
that genre
I like,
has
it's sort of like, it's not mumblecore, but it's kind of mumblecore adjacent. It's in that that world.
Very much so. Yes.
And then number 3, Uncut Gems from the Safdie brothers. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to see it yet.
No, it's wide release. I think is January 31st. It's playing in my local theater in like a couple weeks. But this is a film that wasn't in my top 10 that I suspect will be in my top 10.
Okay.
Because I just love one of the reasons I kind of liked Rise of Skywalker, and a lot of people panned it for it, was its pace. But I like things to move at a pretty good clip if you can keep like consistently doing it throughout the film.
Yeah, and that's this movie to a T.
Yeah, exactly. And if you remember, Florida Project was a movie that wasn't so well received because there's so many like, I think, despicable things that the characters in the film do. And I feel like this is the same in Uncut Gems, but that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. In fact, I actually kind of enjoy it. So I don't know what that says about me.
You like stimulation. You want to be like pounded by sensory inputs, you know?
I guess. But every time I walk into a Dave & Buster's, I'm overwhelmed. So I don't know.
Well, Uncut Gems is less like Dave & Buster's and more like a 2-hour heart attack driven by hard drugs and gambling and booze.
My two favorite things.
It's one person I saw described it recently as like surviving a car accident and crawling out of the burning wreckage only to discover that the last 2 hours was just a weird dream that you had because you fell asleep at the wheel. Like
that sounds like Inherent Vice.
Yeah, it's actually more frenetic than Inherent Vice, but it's got that same kind of wonky flavor to it. So yeah. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. The Safdie brothers are ones to watch for sure. So that's in at number 3 for me. And then for my final 2, at number 2, Parasite from Bong Joon-ho. I have a feeling this one's going to rank up pretty high for you, but he's been doing movies about class struggle and in various contexts, whether it's like a post-apocalyptic or a vaguely dystopian kind of context. But this is probably his most lifelike movie about the various classes kind of locking horns and, who's the virtuous one and who's the predator in those situations. So you're probably going to hear a lot more about Parasite if you haven't seen it already. It's one of those like foreign language movies that will probably rack up a decent number of nominations when they're announced on the 13th. Whether it wins all of them is to be determined, but it's there's a reason why it's got so much energy behind it. So that's in at number 2. And then number 1 of the year for me has to be Ad Astra. It's a movie that not very few people saw, unfortunately. The rollout was a little bit hampered by the fact that it came out right in the middle of festival mania when TIFF was on and a lot of other festivals were poised to start, and not to mention the fact that it was a Fox movie that got caught up in the Disney merger.
Right.
And it's a space movie for adults that Disney didn't really know how to market and were a little bit worried about rolling it out in a significant way, I think. So it was hampered a little bit on that. It was also, it's like Interstellar, but it didn't have the kind of director name recognition that might drive people to the theater to see it. So it's one of those cerebral space movies, but one that has a father and son dynamic in it that we haven't seen in a space movie before, and some very accomplished cinematography and special effects on a relatively low budget for, these types of movies.
I feel like the father-son dynamic is pretty common in space movies. It doesn't have to be father-son. It could be father-daughter. But I feel like there is a lot.
That's where this movie is different, though, because the in this movie, it's the child who has to go into space to track down the parent and kind of help atone for the parent's crimes or mistakes. So there's a twist there that I don't think we've seen in many movies.
Okay, and fair enough.
Not to mention the very like meditative pace of this movie, where it does have moments of action, but a lot more of it is just quiet reflection, which I always like.
I was just thinking about First Man as well, and how important that Ryan Gosling relationship with his wife and his kids were kind of central to the story too.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah. In any case, go out and see it. It's capping off probably for some reason my last couple of months of media, if to use a really like clinical term, has been very space-based. So you've got Star Wars, obviously, Ad Astra.
Yeah, you love space.
There hasn't been a lot of like, normally I would go for like espionage. I'd put that up pretty high, but there hasn't been a lot of really...
We haven't gotten a good one yet.
Yeah, so like that's kind of taken a bit of a backseat recently for me, and it's been all space stuff. I'm about halfway through the first season of The Expanse.
Right
now on Prime Video, so I'm loving that, like the very science-based approach to that compared to the high fantasy of Star Wars. So,
well, you're in luck this year, so because we got Bond and Black Widow.
Yes, so maybe we're gonna take we've had a period of space movies, and now we're gonna get back into the espionage. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, that is my top 10. So I'll roll through them one more time. At number 10, The Farewell. Number 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Number 8, Us. Number 7, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Number 6, Jojo Rabbit. Number 5, Knives Out. Number 4, Marriage Story. Number 3, Uncut Gems. Number 2, Parasite. And number 1, Ad Astra.
Interesting list. Very different. I like it. Before I reveal my list, there are a couple films I haven't seen that I suspect could kind of sneak into the top 10. I really had trouble with this exercise, as I usually do every year, because like... especially in years where there's a couple standout films and then like a ton of really good ones, I just have trouble separating, say, between the 3 and the 4, because sometimes the difference is so negligible, and it comes down to what sort of genre and what kind of characters or actors you like. So Peanut Butter Falcon, Uncut Gems, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, 1917, Ad Astra, and Jojo Rabbit. These are films that I haven't seen that I could see crack into my top 10. So, but since you revealed your list already, I'm going to start from number 1, and then we can work our way back.
All right.
But before I get into that, it is very interesting to me that neither of us really have Ford versus Ferrari or A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood on our lists.
No, I mean, mine's kind of like, if I were to put a number on Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I'd do 21 for that. And if I did a number for Ford v Ferrari, I put that at 18.
So if I did a top 20 list, they would probably rank near the end. It might not even rank at all, depending.
Yeah, so it's pretty similar for me then,
yeah,
too.
I just feel like these two films are getting so much awards buzz, but they're so overrated. I can't help but just like feel anger.
Well, yeah, we are dealing with an academy that gave Best Picture to Green Book last year, so, you know.
Travesty. Still, I mean, my buddy and I were talking about this last night too, but Green Book, Spotlight, and Crash. I mean, 3 of the most, I wouldn't say undeserving, but 3 of the most like eyebrow-raising winners over the past little while. But anyway, let's go to my list. So you're right. At number 1, I do have Parasite. This film just kind of blew me away the first time I saw it. I do think that film is moving towards a genre-less sort of medium where you can have a whole mishmash of different things. And as long as you do the tonal shifts right, I think it's okay. And I actually think I enjoy it because I don't necessarily enjoy one genre over the other. So thinking back, you look at Aquaman, which had like bits and pieces of all different genres. I actually kind of enjoyed it. So when it's done right, it can be entertaining. So for me, in terms of drama, acting, cinematography, the overall package, I thought Parasite was the best experience I had. So that's my number 1. Number 2, again, similar. I have Marriage Story at number 2. Mm-hmm. This actually ranked higher than I expected. Probably because I have a thing against mumblecore, but when it's done right, it's done very well. And this is a movie that's done very well. And I like the way it's structured. I love the performances. I love how I think it never strays from this sort of smoothness. Like there are shouty moments, but it doesn't go off on tangents. Like a character doesn't all of a sudden go off the deep end, which a lot of these movies tend to do.
Right.
So I appreciated that very much. If I had to pick, I think this one and Parasite would be the 2 frontrunners for Best Picture right now.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
At number 3, I have Knives Out. And I'm kind of surprised I ranked this higher than you. Keep in mind, I haven't seen Uncut Gems or Ad Astra.
Well, yeah, I've got those 2. Yeah.
Exactly. So Knives Out, we both agree this is a great whodunit throwback film. Really focused, really, I think, specific in its desire to accomplish what it wants to accomplish. Rian Johnson, I'm not as big a fan as you, but I think this is the perfect genre for him. For someone who like really, I think, revels in subverting expectations, I think this is a really nice job. Much better than Last Jedi. Number 4, I have this ranked higher than you, is The Farewell. So this was a film that I kind of forgot because it was released so early in 2019. And there are very few movies who I think can capture sort of cultural differences that are very nuanced. And this is one of those films. And being of Asian descent myself, I think there are a lot of things I picked up on in this film that other people might not have, although that may be presumptuous. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought Awkwafina was great. Lulu Wang really knows the material. You can sense that. Someone like Barry Jenkins with the movies he's done, you just know when a director gets something. A lot of the things are details that you would never consider or are written in a screenplay that are buoyed by characters' performances. And I love the bilingual aspect of it. And number 5, this is where I think I get a little controversial. But this is, again, starting to be the messy middle where number 5 and number 7 could flip-flop and I'd be okay with it. So number 5 is Dolomite Is My Name.
Oh, okay.
This is the Eddie Murphy vehicle about Rudy Ray Moore, Dolomite, who is a blaxploitation actor back, I think, was it the 70s?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. I love this movie. Again, the pacing is breakneck. Things happen quite quickly, but I love it. A lot of these things with biographical films is that you tend to have like a very like caricature, smarmy villain. And so in the case of Ford v Ferrari, this is Josh Lucas's character. So I'm very happy in Dolomite Is My Name that overall there wasn't like an antagonizing force for the sake of antagonism. I think for the most part, a lot of the characters in the film are very supportive of Eddie Murphy. They have good reasons to doubt his ability, but I like how it's, I think, a very positive and triumphant film. I thought the performance was great. Wesley Snipes was great. There wasn't a single thing I didn't really like about it, but I can see why people would think this is a nothing film, a very paint by the numbers autobiographical film, but I really liked it. Number 6, again, another biographical film, The Irishman. So my problem with this film is mostly based on length and the fact that I don't think Scorsese really pushes the limits of what he can do, other than the fact that this 3.5-hour movie covers a lot of time and it takes a lot of skill and editing skill to tell a coherent story. And
just for me, like I put it in my top 15. If we were doing a top 15, I'd put mine at like 13.
Okay, yeah. So we can all agree this is a good film, not a great film. By no means do I think this is Scorsese's top 5 film ever.
No.
I do think people kind of missed the boat on Al Pacino, who I think was better than Robert De Niro. I think Pacino's performance was just much better, maybe because we only know Jimmy Hoffa for a certain period of time, whereas Robert De Niro covers a lot, and he's not a very convincing 30, 40, 50-year-old.
Yeah, as much as those like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, like you watch him throw a gun into the river, and you're like, wow, this guy does not have any range of motion, right? Number 7. This is where it starts to get hard, but I have A Hidden Life here.
Okay.
So A Hidden Life was, again, another bit of a frustrating movie because of the length. But in terms of like a return to form for Terrence Malick, a meditative spiritual piece with tons of great scenery and cinematography, I really liked what this film was trying to say. I think the execution missed a little bit, and this is one of those films that could fall out of the top 10. But so far, I really do think that if you have the time for it, if you have the patience for it, if you understand Terrence Malick's love for interpretive, I guess, I don't know, hay cutting, interpretive farm work, I guess. I don't even know what to call it. I think this is a really good film. Number 8, I don't disagree with you on anything here. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You have a number 7, I have a number 8. So we're pretty on the spot with this one.
Yeah.
Now, the next 2 of 3, I constantly debate. I haven't really finalized it, and I feel like I have time to do it before the awards, so don't blame me just yet. But number 9, and I'm kind of surprised this didn't make yours, but The Lighthouse.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this like really experimental film really pushed the limits. I thought its execution was fantastic. There are certain parts of the film that lost me, but like all the films from like number 6 onwards, there are always parts that just I didn't really feel. But The Lighthouse with Barbara Pattinson and Willem Dafoe about these 2 lighthouse keepers who go crazy in this New England lighthouse just had everything you'd want in sort of a Lovecraftian horror film.
Yes, and like I loved it too. I mean, I wanted it in my top 10, but it got bumped to 11.
Right. So like I'm a big fan of experimental film. If you do something different and it works, I love it. I think films these days don't take enough risks, and that's always been my complaint about a lot of films, actually. So The Lighthouse took a risk, ran with it, and the result was, I think, a really great horror thriller. And the last spot, so this one I had trouble with, but it came down to Booksmart and Joker.
Okay.
And I'm inclined to put Booksmart in. So I'm a big fan of teen movies, I would say. Booksmart, I thought, was different from a lot of the raunchy teen films that we used to get in the 2000s.
Yeah.
I love Caitlin Dever and Beanie Feldstein's relationship. I thought it was a pretty predictable film, but also there was enough in there that was new and fresh to me, and there was enough funny moments in it for me to make this really enjoyable. The overall look of the film I thought was pretty unique. It almost looks like a throwback film about high school in the 80s and 90s. Something about the aesthetic in there.
Yeah, it could be that like the 80s are back right now, or they were back or so. I don't know. Can't keep track of that stuff. But yeah, there's definitely like there's callbacks to that era of like John Hughes movies.
Right, exactly. And if you look at the costumes some of these characters wear, the round glasses, the sequin dresses that the two leads wear, I think is really great. And The Joker is just a film that I think was very well done, but not, again, for a film that takes on such a psychotic character, it doesn't take enough risks. Very well done, but I think this would be number 11 if I had to pick right now.
Yeah, I pushed it pretty far down the list, and not because I didn't like it, but because I felt it was edged out by a lot of other movies that I rank at like similar star rankings, but that I actually I liked more overall. So
yes,
for me, it was all the way down to 27.
Yeah, and this one, I think it's really hard to peel away the sort of public discourse about this film. I think sometimes when a film gets so much attention in the press, it kind of makes people more entrenched in their opinions. So if you really liked Joker and someone said, no, it's not a good film, it doesn't take risks, I think you're more inclined to just dig deep and be like, well, this is the top 10 film of the year.
Yeah, right.
It's sort of like the Star Wars discourse, where I think you have two sides that are deeply entrenched. But so for the top half, I think we were kind of in agreement. But the bottom half is where we really start to differ.
Right.
Which is not unusual, but I think reflective of the year we had, where there were few real standouts, consensus standouts, but a lot of good films that I think are up to subjective opinion, where you could rank anywhere from 4 to 15, and I think you could justify any of those rankings.
Yeah. And do you feel like this year you ended up seeing more movies in theaters than you did in previous years?
I wouldn't say more.
Maybe an equal number? I ended up seeing one less, which has surprised me.
I usually watch the same number of movies every year, like a few a month. That comes out to, I think. I don't know. I thought this year would be really strong. But it isn't, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I think maybe my expectations are too high, especially with the summer blockbusters. Like if you look at our lists, no big summer blockbuster made it.
No, I mean I put for summer blockbusters probably like John Wick is down at 17 for me. Endgame is down at 28. Far From Home 26, Captain Marvel 31.
And it wasn't too long ago where we were kind of debating if Black Panther or Infinity War were the best films of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
So either they've gotten worse in quality or we've gotten sick of them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, as I did have a good time at Endgame, I'm not going to deny that. I feel like the experience, the overall like Marvel experience was beat out by a lot of really, really good stuff this year. Like all the ones that we just listed, or even the ones that I'm putting in like numbers 11 through 20. Like,
right.
I've also got stuff like High Life on there. That's not a 2019 release. Technically, it came out in 2018, but it didn't make wide release until this past year, 2019.
Okay, so what's the rule behind that? Because Just Mercy was pushed from 2019 December to 2020 January. Does it qualify as a 2019 film? Because it was shown.
I think it does, yeah.
So because it was shown in festivals in 2019.
Yeah, because they showed it at festivals, and they showed it like for regular consumers in like LA and New York. And
Okay.
that qualifies it for the Oscars. You know, as far as the Oscars are concerned, it's eligible. High Life was similar in the sense that it was didn't really roll out until 2019, and the fact that it was like a movie made by a French auteur and all that stuff,
Right.
so that it was delayed even more because of that. So yeah, that for me, like technically, I saw that this past year, but it's a 2018 movie according to the technical people.
Right.
But then other stuff in my like top 20, for example, I have John Wick 3, 4v Ferrari is in there. The Hugh Jackman movie, Bad Education, which...
That almost made my list.
Yeah, it got snapped up by HBO, so it's not getting the kind of rollout that it otherwise would.
Right.
And even Dr. Sleep, which I talked about here on the show, I put that at number 16. I like that a lot more than I expected. So, those are kind of filling in some of the that back 10.
Where did you have Midsommar?
I have that at 25.
Oh, okay.
So I had it up higher to start, but then I've been a bit conflicted about Midsommar. There's been a few like things with the like character motivations that I've meditated about. I don't like quite as much as I did when it first came out.
Which is why I'm surprised Rise of Skywalker cracked your top 10, because I feel like there are a lot of character motivations and character decisions in that movie that I think were questionable.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. But it's Star Wars, so it gets a pass from me.
I guess these are subjective top 10 lists, so I'll let it slide.
But I've got like other stuff ahead of Midsommar, for example. I've got the Godzilla sequel, which probably very few people would understand, but like I love Godzilla too. So
Godzilla was near the bottom of my list. I found it so boring.
I don't know. I loved him going thermonuclear and blowing up King Ghidorah. That was great.
Well, I mean, I should say there's sequences in every film that I like, but as a whole, no. It's like a Rise of Skywalker. I had it in my 20s. Maybe.
Okay.
I didn't go that far because like after top 15, I just like cut everything out, but it was definitely not even close to top 15 for Rise of Skywalker or Godzilla.
Yeah. Well, I put like Alita Battle Angel ahead of Godzilla. But oddly, Godzilla is ahead of both Joker and Endgame, which doesn't make a whole amount. But again, like it's that same problem you were talking about where you're dealing with a mushy middle where you're kind of like, you know, from one day to the next or 1 month to the next, you're going to be swapping stuff out. So like probably like Endgame is a better film than Godzilla. But when I made this list, I had seen Godzilla more recently. So,
oh, okay.
But then it might totally change around when you ask me like next month or something. So do you want to close things out just real quick with some stuff that we hated this year?
Sure.
In terms of stuff that I absolutely hated, one thing that this isn't something I saw theatrically, thank God, but Six Underground on Netflix.
The Ryan Reynolds movie.
Oh my God. That is one of the most steaming piles of cinematic trash that I've seen.
Really?
This year, yeah, or 2019. There are definitely bayheads out there. I get it. I understand the appeal of stuff like The Rock. I like The Rock. The Rock was a good movie, and some of his earlier work. But the Transformers stuff, obviously, we're not going to get into that. But this new one, people were like, "Oh, this is his first directing job since finishing up with the Transformers movies. Maybe he'll go back to doing stuff like he did in The Rock. Maybe, but also he's paired it with like some of the most garbage politics and nihilistic viewpoints. It just left an incredibly bad taste in my mouth. It's simultaneously lazy, but also really committed at being an ugly movie.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely at the bottom of my list.
Anything else?
Another one would be Hellboy.
Oh no.
You know, that gets an extra bonus amount of hate because it was so disappointing. You know, there was a lot of promise going into it of being a more adult interpretation of the character, but just the shoddiness of the way it was put together was a huge disappointment. Other 2019 lowlights, the Lion King remake, that was really annoying. Men in Black International, also very poor.
I skipped that. I'm kind of thankful I skipped it.
Yeah. Seberg, the Kristen Stewart biopic about Gene Seberg, that was that
bad.
Yeah, really just like a combination of like a very irritating political viewpoint, combined with some very sloppy filmmaking.
You know that new Kristen Stewart movie coming out, the one where she's underwater?
Yeah, and it's just called like Underwater.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I was trying to think of the title. I was like, why does it not come to me?
I think it's just called Underwater.
Okay. Yeah. So that movie was made 2 years ago too. So
yeah,
that's another stinker potentially. But
yeah, very likely. Yeah. Do you track down any lowlights for your viewing?
Yes, I did. By far, my most hated film of 2019. And looking back, it's not even a competition at all. It's Adam Agoyan's Guest of Honor.
Oh yes, okay. You talked about that when you were at VIF.
Oh my god, it was the opening film for VIF, and only because Adam Agoyan is a local filmmaker. But this is the most convoluted, cliched, like, incomprehensible movie I've seen in quite some time. I rarely get angry through like watching films, but this was one of those films that like it wasn't the content that made me angry, it was the execution and just its lack of focus. So this is a story about David Thewlis playing a health inspector in Toronto, trying to come to terms with this fractured relationship with his daughter, which is complicated by murder, death,
infidelity.
Did you see this movie?
No, but I remember you ranting about it before. Oh my god,
it is so bad. I would put this up there as among one of the worst films I've seen in the past 5 years. But okay, let's move on because I just can't. Like I don't understand the hype behind the director. He made one good movie many years ago and he's coasted on it since. The other movie that was really disappointing to me was Motherless Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. This was the Edward Norton directed sort of, I guess, noir kind of period piece about a Tourette's detective with Tourette's.
Yeah,
that's a better way to put it.
There's not a lot of detectives with Tourette's.
Yeah. So he's uncovering this like city conspiracy, has to deal with dirty cops, the mob, informants, politics, all that kind of stuff. It sounds great on paper. On film, it is tragically boring. Really did not deliver. This is again one of those films where like it really sours me on Edward Norton as a filmmaker. We all know he has a reputation, right? So this, I think, in my opinion, proves to me that as a filmmaker alone, without some sort of oversight, he just can't execute something very well. The third one is probably Io. Do you remember that one? It was a Netflix sci-fi pick with Anthony Mackie and I think Margaret Qualley. Yeah, exactly. And again, one of those post-apocalyptic space films about new life, new planets, and it is so tragically boring. I fell asleep. There's no chemistry between the leads. The production design is okay. You kind of expect better. It's kind of crazy to think about how hard it is to replicate a post-apocalyptic universe. It's not just about empty rooms and dust flying all over the place. For that reason, I don't think it was a very compelling emotional piece either. So there's that. And then I hate to throw this in there, but Dark Phoenix was not very good. I personally enjoyed it just because I think it's the X-Men thing, and I think Sophie Turner actually was a good Jean Grey. But yeah, those are probably my worst films of the year. So I think, is it fair to come to a consensus that we both think Parasite is probably the best movie of the year?
No, because I put Ad Astra at the top of it.
But I don't have Ad Astra on my list, so my number one versus your number two basically means number one.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, if we're going with like the weighted kind of thing between the two of us, then yeah. Next episode, we'll be reacting to whatever comes from the Oscar nominations. So we're recording.
When do they come out again?
They come out on the 13th. So we're recording this on the 5th of January. So, you know, by the time this episode comes out, the nominations may have already been released. It depends on.
All right. So quick question.
Edit, but yeah.
Quick question. Which film do you think will have the most nominations?
The most nominations. I think Marriage Story.
Oh, okay. I'm with you there. I think Marriage Story is going to get the most.
Yeah. I think it'll be Marriage Story, Uncut Gems, Parasite, Knives Out.
Uncut Gems, really, eh?
Well,
it's not getting a lot of critical love. Like,
well, it's getting
really
critical love. It's not getting so much like
viewer like awards love.
Well, viewer love, because not very many people have seen it yet.
I mean, the people who have seen it really like it, but I just don't think it's a film because it's Adam Sandler, because of the content. I don't think it's a film that awards awards bodies love.
No, I don't think it'll win any. I think it'll pick up some nominations, but I don't think it'll win a whole lot.
Right. I'll put the over under at 5. I think it'll get under 5 nominations total. My top picks would be Marriage Story and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think those two would get the most nominations.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Maybe The Irishman, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Marriage Story for sure would be my top 2. I would hesitate to say that either of those films would be in the top 20 of the decade. I don't know if 2019 was a particularly strong year.
You always say that, though. That's the problem.
I know that's the problem. But looking back, I think 2016 was a really last strong year. I can't remember what I said about 2016.
No, you definitely said that it wasn't a strong year. You say that every year.
2016?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, fine.
But
fine. I guess my expectations are always too high. I don't know.
Well, it's good to have high expectations, though. I mean, but I think...
But then you're easily disappointed.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, for me, like, top of the decade, I'm just doing some quick sorting here on Letterboxd, and for me, Parasite is in there as like stuff that I gave like the highest ranking to.
I don't know. Top 10 of the decade would be too difficult. I'd have at least 2 Paul Thomas Anderson films in there. So
yes, yeah. I think I've got like, let's see, Boyhood's in there. Obviously Wes Anderson, Arrival.
I mean, Moonlight is in there. Arrival would be up
Ghost
there.
Story, Blade Runner 2049.
See, all these films I would rank ahead of Marriage Story for sure.
According to Letterboxd, of the like 1,600 or more total films that I've logged on the service, I've watched 811 movies from the 2010s. So
810.
811. So that means that like over half of my total, like everything I've ever watched was in that decade.
Oh, whack. Really?
That's why I love Letterboxd. You can kind of get that perspective. But yeah.
Well, I'm surprised because I only have 400 in the 2010s, it looks like.
But I mean, that's where your specialties are, because you've seen a lot more of these stuff from like the 80s and 90s than I have. So
yeah, true. Yeah, I do have a soft spot for 90s films, so.
Looking ahead in the future, though, we will be talking about the Oscar nominations in the next episode. We may also touch on some more of the things that we will have seen that we've caught up on from 2019. I might get a chance to talk about 1917, which I saw recently. Some sort of mixed feelings on that. And of course, we will have to be casting our attention ahead to what everything the 2020 has to offer, including stuff like Dune and the new Bond film, No Time to Die, and of course all of the indie things that we don't even know exist yet. Stuff coming out of Sundance and Cannes and places like that. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting time here on the podcast. But I think that about does it for this episode. Head over to kinetoscope.ca where you can see my review of The Rise of Skywalker, and you can comment under it and tell me that I'm wrong. I'll be posting a couple of wrap-ups of some of the new stuff to appear on Netflix and on Amazon Prime Video in the coming days, so keep your eyes open for that. And until the next episode, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.